Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Comeback webinar. My name's MayKay, and I'm the host for today for this wonderful panel. And I also was the host of the Kildare Comeback Festival that was on, finished up a couple of weeks ago. So today, I suppose our aim, I've done a few things like this over the last while, and it's very easy to get bogged down in talking about what's gone wrong and what we've lost and all the things that have gone with the pandemic. But what's exciting about today's panel, really, for me anyway, is that going forward, there are things that we've learned and there are ways that we can improve on what we've been doing already. I have three great panelists to discuss that from three different areas. So I'll have Lloyd Mayer, Lucina Russell and Ruth Fuller. So I'll be introducing you to those panelists a little bit later on, and we'll be talking with them everything from how events will be able to go ahead, if they'll be able to go ahead in the event of another disaster, and in what way have we kind of reinforced ourselves and our business to make sure that we can go ahead in the event of disasters such as the one we're going through at the moment. We've got some great interview clips from artists that played the Kildare Comeback Festival talking about some great things that came out of being forced to go completely digital, some really special things that have gone on throughout the pandemic. And most importantly, we've got some wonderful music. It was such a pleasure being back in beautiful venues, especially in Kildare. And we saw some really, really special things. And most of all, for the artists on stage, we saw a live audience, albeit a small one, but a very, very engaged and kind and happy audience we had every night. So let's see a little bit of footage from that very special festival. We are here in St. David's Church in Naas for Kildare Comeback Festival 2021. Hi there, I'm MayKay. I am outside the wonderful Moat Theatre in Naas, County Kildare. Hello, you're welcome to the Kildare Comeback Festival 2021. We're here in St. Patrick's Church in Newbridge. We've seen some amazing acts and we've gotten to feel the atmosphere of people getting back out and seeing live music again. And tonight the atmosphere is electric because people are on the way in to see the great Christy Moore. So
and toast marshmallows on a cold dog on your flame. I wanna be near you and blink in your light, and toast marshmallows on a cold dog. Well, not no doubt and not no pain, and always find a shelter from the rain.
Treat you unkind. Came around in the middle of the night, heard mama crying, knew something wasn't right. Was headed down to Knoxville with a weekly load. You could smell the whiskey burning down Copperhead Road.
So what you're seeing there is some wonderful footage, and the great thing about it is, and one thing we'll be discussing a lot today, is that mix of that hybrid festival, that hybrid show that we're going to see more of from now on, so digital and live. There's a lot of really great things that I've gotten to see from it being digital as well. It's become more accessible for lots of reasons. But it was nothing compared to having that audience sitting in front too. I think that's kind of the perfect balance for a band. And also a great thing was we've got acts like Bell X1 and Christy Moore, who've been around for, a couple of transformations, to say the least, in the music industry and the live events industry. And then you've got fresh acts who actually kind of just started to thrive during the pandemic. So they mightn't be as upset as the likes of me because they didn't know much about it beforehand. So they've got a lot of really wonderfully positive things to say about it. One of the highlights of the week was an amazing artist called JYellowL, and let's see a clip of him playing in St. David's Church in Naas, his track Me and Me Too.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, JYellowL!
Allow myself to introduce
Yo, how are we feeling?
Myself.
JYellowL. Look, friendly neighborhood yellow man. Friendly neighborhood yellow man. Look, see, I needed the edge of my music. Damn, so I went and got that. And I never gone back. When I come back on the track, it's a banger. That's a fun fact. Rotate, overtake those who don't run fast. They pose in fake clothes, I'm not on that day. Said I only talk about problems, Kato, but they know they don't want that. They pose with Dracos and Top Gun chat, yeah. They stay ghost, I want contact now. Carrying the whole game now, so I brain showed the blaze, bro. Now I'm hunchback, but figuratively speaking, she's got figuratively speaking. We're not really into saving these, but we got case if we need them. Big up haters, we need them. T-Car, we got paid to be tweaking. And I'm feeling like a Yoruba demon. Like we rock natives this evening. She said I'm paying, that's why I'm smiling lost. Typed the 10 into my dialing box. It was a dry event, so the time is tops. And I was trying to link, I wasn't trying to talk. Hey, what food's that grilled cheese? Hey, are you gonna use that little piece? And I heard you're an artist. Same, what you do? I kill beasts. I run no one knows I'm an animal, bro. I put a hand on anybody, put a hand on my throne. Back on bold, I'm matting like a bat with both. The hand in my rope, and then I put it back in the bowl. And this the only fight none of my manner involved. The hand on my own, but how do you make a random unknown? The back of the poem, back of the vernacular donor, back in the clone, and acted the immaculate flow. I had to kind of recalibrate the caliber growth. The parent, your baron is barren, it's embarrassing, bro. Command the rhythm like I'm handling the battling ropes. Mannerisms are rallying, and yeah, I'm a radical poet. I want a pattern on the banner and bold. I want to travel around the world like a sabbatical pole. Yellow calico cloak, I want to dabble in metallic, I hope. Want to balance my mama, not my man can vote. On a panel with Hove, I hope my talent will show. I hope my talent will show.
It's over for these boys,
see, rap poetry, I juggle and vote like K-Dot. Now they want to use a couple of quotes, I pray not. People hitting popular notes, only you're close because I got them up on the ropes. Reputation is the only thing I got uphold. Let you hate, but keep the heat when the winter got cold. Holding up my middle finger when the gentleman pose. Legitimate shows, I keep my perimeter close. Hey, come home, bump. Wait, tell me where the Wi-Fi codes are, show stars. How do you want the lights, man, so dark, cold heart. When I'm on the mic, I'm Mozart. When I'm on the mic, I'm Mozart. When I'm on the mic, I'm Mozart. And I got a bite like Cobra. When I'm on the mic, I make the motor rate trickle down definitely. I coordinate every now literally. Take a water break, make it sound legendary. Breastplate chop, if you wanna mess with me, yes, it's calm. We don't wanna rent, we don't comprehend your intent. We don't wanna spend, we invest in calm. Cheese! I kill them. Breeze! Who rape our children are the same ones who pray for the pilgrims.
Please do save our children.
Please do save our children. Yeah, yellow, you save our children. You save our children. Yeah, yellow, you save our children. Yo, how we feel?
That was the great JYellowL. Sometimes I think I'm kind of cool, and then I see something like that and remember I'm not. So I appreciate him bringing me back down to earth. Thank you, Jay. First of all, from our wonderful panel today, I'm going to introduce you to Lloyd Mayer. Lloyd, Lloyd's area, I mean, everybody, there's not a person amongst us who hasn't been heavily affected in the last 18 months. Lloyd, firmly embedded in the live events, festival management arena, probably knows a lot more about it than most. Lloyd, you're still alive and well anyway, in spite of the madness of the last 18 months.
Yeah, no, that's very kind of you. And I think I'm surely on the BMI scale for risk, so alive in both senses of the term. But yeah, no, that's very kind.
So Lloyd, it's a complex enough area anyway, just the curation and management of major festivals and major events and of all types. I think there's a lot more involved than most people know. There are now a lot more things involved for you in terms of being able to even approach pulling off a major event safely, successfully, with things looking like they're coming back now. How do you see this moving forward with this kind of new hybrid space that we're in between digital and live events?
Well, I think the major change for a hybrid event is, of course, the infrastructure required to make the digital side deliverable and make it engage with the audience who would go to that platform to consume entertainment of that type. There's a real skill set and pedigree and knowledge history around putting on a live event. But the digital hybrid is relatively new in this arena. I know that Glastonbury, for example, have had the BBC Red Button for a long time, and they've had the digital consumership of that. But then, of course, that's put on by the BBC. So as we step away from that type of production towards a more, if every event wants to have a digital aspect to it, then there's more to consider. But really, it's on the crowd safety side post-COVID, that adds new dynamics of biosecurity. There's a new layer of information to consider there. In the digital space, of course, you don't have that. But what I'm unsighted on is the demand from the audience. If we think about the audience first and who consumes that type of entertainment, then the market is quite saturated. There's lots of Netflix, there's lots of Disney Plus, there's lots of ways to get digital entertainment. There's YouTube, there's live links from Facebook, there's live, I tend to see a lot of it in the conferencing market and the exhibitions because people don't want to travel too far. And things like this are fantastic in the digital space. I don't know if it's going to translate for the long term or if it's really going to take off, having hybrid digital exposure to live events. It's not something I'm personally convinced on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I understand what you mean. I really love it for lots of reasons. I love it. I love how accessible it is for people who maybe can't get to venues. I love how accessible it is for people who are too young to go to venues. I loved seeing comments on shows, pictures of people's kids and saying it's their first gig and they're watching it online from their living room. That is lovely. But I suppose for artists, we need to be in front of people. It's looking a little bit uncertain here, Lloyd. Our October 22nd announcement of things opening all the way back up. There seems to be a little bit of doubt cast over that actually going ahead now. To your mind, and I know this is a big question that I'm asking you to summarize in a relatively short space of time, how can we avoid that complete shutting down of live events, to your mind, in the future?
So I think it comes down to the will of the public. When we look at the Spanish flu that was around in early part of the 1900s, it's never ended. I got a text message for my flu vaccine last week. So this is over 105 years, 108 years, I think, since the outbreak. It's been around forever, and it's genetically the same strain. So it's never going to end. The only reason it ended in the 1920s was public attitude. They'd had enough. The First World War was finished. People wanted the roaring 20s. They wanted to get out. They wanted to get going. And I was asked a similar question about the UK market back in April around whether or not I thought the August events would go ahead. And I said with certainty, absolutely. My personal belief was they absolutely would. Because ultimately people are happy to start taking on some personal risk. It was right to shut everything down morally and ethically, I think, when it first came out, and it was brand new and it was a lottery and it was a killer. There's a vaccine out there now that people can take, and they have a personal choice as to whether they put themselves in harm's way if they've made themselves vaccinated and what they do with it. So I think as you get closer towards October the 22nd, and you get closer towards where you're at with vaccine, we're starting to see the world open up. We're starting to see public attitude change. We've looked after the vulnerable. We've looked after the most needy. We've offered the protections, and now it's time to get going.
And I definitely want to ask you a little bit about kind of technology's role in all of that. But first of all, I got to talk to Paul and Dave from Bell X1, because the more we talk about the will of the people, the more I just think about how crushing it would be if we weren't allowed in front of audiences again. So let's hear from Paul and Dave talking a little bit about the importance of being back in front of crowds. We are here in St. David's Church in Naas for Kildare Comeback Festival 2021, celebrating all things Kildare and celebrating the return in some shape and form of live music that we've missed so much. I am now in the presence of greatness, in my honest opinion. I'm here with Paul Noonan and Dave Garrity from Bell X1. It is you! Hey!
Hi!
Thanks for being here.
Oh man, yeah, it's been a joy.
The streaming shows were great at the start, weren't they? It was lovely to be able to still perform and play to people. But then that got a little bit tough after a while, didn't it? It must be lovely to look into people's eyes again.
Yeah, there was screen fatigue, wasn't there? That set in.
Yeah.
It was too close to work, I guess. Everybody on screens for everything, really. So there wasn't that separation. I'm on screen enjoying myself now, you know, at a gig, at a gig. You know. But it was tough.
Because with streaming, you don't know who's watching. Like, you don't know if people have made the effort and got the nachos and the bottle of wine and the big screen, or if somebody's sitting on the phone on the jacks looking at you. So, yeah, we went there.
Things that go through Paul's mind mid-song.
That's it. I have nothing else to ask. That was a little nugget there that I didn't know it was concerning you.
Which, my point is, it's so nice to see an actual audience and play to feel that connection in the room. There's no substitute for it.
Yeah, that was a golden nugget. I think you coined it really, really right there.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So Lloyd, just one more thing while I have you now. Would you tell us a bit about Halo and maybe then about how technology, I mean, obviously technology has grown and developed so much over the past decade anyway, but in the past 18 months, it's become even more evident its importance in our sector. So would you tell us a bit about Halo and a bit about technology moving forward with regards to events?
Yeah, absolutely. And not a sales pitch, but a general introduction to the concept, really. So I think there's a growing understanding now amongst event professionals that we should make the event safe first and then have the event. And that doesn't mean necessarily having lots and lots of technology in place. It could mean just, for some people, ordering the right number of barriers and the right number of toilets. But make the event safe, then have the event. And to make the event safe now, we've started to progress to a stage post 2017 and the Manchester Arena bombings and the protect duty that's coming up in the United Kingdom and other legislation around the world, which is similar, where people are saying, actually, spreadsheets, WhatsApp groups, radio channels aren't enough. On a radio channel, you can only have one voice at once. We're not sharing photographs. If we're sharing photographs on WhatsApp, what's the provenance, what's the GDPR, what's the legal coverage? And I think we've kind of sleepwalked into a control room environment where we have multiple radio channels from multiple functional areas. We still only have one or two human beings in that control room that are managing all of those inputs, and we're catching up to demand. And it's about having the right system in that room that can cope with that demand, that can keep the complexities of a control room simple. Because time after time, there are studies, academic studies, and there are public inquiries and reports which all showcase, is it reasonably foreseeable the communications are going to be a problem, even in steady states, never mind when a crisis occurs? Yes, it is. And then inevitably, when the crisis occurs, therefore, the communications become the biggest part of the debrief. So if we sort out the safety first and the communications first, that's what the Halo system does. It puts all these platforms all into one. And technology is really at the forefront of a lot of change in terms of access control, in terms of ticket scanning, in terms of the way we interact with our crowd in a cashless environment, the way we make that crowd less anonymous so we can continue to market to them and work with them and give them the things that they want to enjoy and take away most from the event. People will download an official app for a festival so they can see set lists and maps and things that are happening. They will download an official app for a sports stadium of some kind so they can order merchandise at food catering, at seat catering, and things like that. So there is a huge appetite for official apps for the public. And if you can tag onto that an incident management platform so the public can report things, you'll be really surprised, positively and negatively, of what you'll get if you give everybody a voice. Sometimes it's banter on the soccer results. Sometimes it's actually that person 2 seats away from me is really quite racist. I don't like it. And if we want to affect change, we must at least first give people a voice.
Wow, God, that would be amazing. I suppose I really don't ever like to come across like I'm saying the pandemic was a good thing, but of the few little sparks in it, one of them has been, I think, that chance that we would never have had otherwise to sit back and, you know, talk about safety at gigs and things like that. We were all so eager to just get back on stage or get back on a pitch or whatever, that we maybe have had some time now to think about the actual audience's experience and how we can improve that. And they seem like incredibly positive, pragmatic steps. Is Halo in operation at the moment, Lloyd?
Yeah, in 4 or 5 different countries, doing lots of different things. We're all over sports stadia and music arenas in Britain. We're working on an event over in Saudi. We've continued to support the police in Malta throughout their COVID response. We've been at events really since the British Grand Prix at Silverstone reopened the season over here in Britain. So that's Britain's largest event with 360,000 people, and it was quite shocking to go from the office to a field with that many people in after 18 months.
Yeah, my God. Well, anyway, we absolutely love to see it more than anything. And I'll come back to you, Lloyd, for a final word later on. Thank you so much for all that insight. And very positive. I have tickets for Little Sims in November, and I'm basically taking from you that it's definitely going ahead. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's confirmed. Lloyd, thank you so much. I'll come back and we'll chat to you a little bit later on. So the next wonderful person I have on the panel today from the Arts Council, from the Arts Office in Kildare County Council, is Lucina Russell. Lucina, you're very welcome. Would you please give me a brief introduction and some background on your role, please?
Yeah, hi MayKay, lovely to be here. So I suppose my main responsibility as arts officer in the county council, or any arts officer in a local authority, is twofold, I suppose. One is to support artists in the county, and that can be artists from dancers, writers, musicians, theatre performers, so all artists, and then also audiences. And I suppose in relation to this event today, so the second component then is audience experiences. And for citizens in Kildare to have quality arts experiences. And I suppose in relation to today's webinar, I would be focusing on the quality part of it as well, and to try and bring arts experiences to audiences that wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to do so.
Okay, so do you want to go a little bit into when you refer to people who wouldn't have an opportunity to see these things otherwise? What are we talking about there?
Well, I suppose I think the role of an arts office in any county is to try and provide local experiences so that you don't feel that you have to go to, capital cities or whatever. So, like, I'm based in Riverbank Arts Centre, so but not arts experiences don't have to be specific to buildings. And I think one of the lovely things about this scheme as well was that we got to showcase some of the fabulous churches in the county as well, who with fabulous acoustics and backgrounds. So to try and make things accessible in terms of geographical location, so hopefully that people, transport isn't an obstacle to coming to a gig. Financially, I think maybe sometimes cultural barriers as well. So I think it was lovely to see a diversity in the programme here. So there's a lot of different levels to it, I suppose.
And I suppose from my perspective, so as a musician, my kind of idea of what councils provided and arts councils and arts offices provided was as clear as dishwater really before, and that's no reflection on yourselves. It's more to do with kind of how rarely I would have interacted directly with an arts office. In the past 18 months, I think I've gotten to know the arts officers more than I've gotten to know my own family. So would you talk a little bit about how the role changed for your offices during the pandemic at the start of COVID?
Yeah, and certainly, it's funny to talk about the positives, but certainly for ourselves, it's great that I'd feel there's a little bit more visibility. And I suppose pre-COVID, and I don't like to make a distinction between commercial music and non-commercial music, but I suppose the type of work that we would fund might be less commercially viable, and we would subsidise artists that might make work that doesn't necessarily have an audience or that work with communities. So, for example, arts and health, arts and education, and that would be a core focus of what we do. But we would have funded programmes, so maybe a musician to write a piece of work. So it would have been more around the development of their practice and their art, whereas I think there's more of a focus over the pandemic into the performance opportunities of it. And then as well, something we're very keen on, and some of this, it already existed pre-COVID, but professional development and training. So we would have invested in programs to try and upskill people on their recording skills as well. We ran a course last year for artists. That's keen, just to try and get the product as good as it can be. But in the past as well, we had, I was just reflecting in preparation for this and some of the projects that we did, and And when Oxygen was in Punchestown, we had a scheme. It was actually written into the planning condition that local bands from Kildare got to open the emerging stage, and that was great fun. So I worked with the planners, environment section, and that was really exciting. And I feel even some of the things that Lloyd said there around safety, as we re-emerge from this, I'd like to see maybe more collaborations with other departments as well in the local authority that would just give that extra boost, because some of the things that Lloyd was saying around safety and that, I mean, they're expensive and it's not always musicians or performers' expertise either. So if we can at all support people, and that could be access to venues as well, or just local knowledge around health and safety, that type of thing.
And I think one of the huge things anyway, Lucina, as you know, is that for a lot of artists, particularly ones, and I don't think there's anything wrong with deciphering between commercial and non-commercial, you know, or commercially viable. Like that's just a, you know, it's a fact. I know it doesn't feel nice to distinguish it under that umbrella, but that's just a fact. But I got to chat to Tebi Rex during the Comeback Festival about how because things were funded nicely and there was a bit of money there and there was also that time there was a lot more time for creating, which is what we all want to do. It's almost like the live aspect of it is just the end little bit. There's this huge journey that we all go on the lead up to that. So let's hear Tebi Rex talking a little bit about what they got up to during the lockdown. Max, you have this hilarious, informative, brilliant podcast with Mango, and we get to see how much you kind of love each other, kind of hate each other. How's that going?
I hate that guy. No, but I love that guy for real. I think what it was because I was working in marketing before, it's marketing events, and I quite enjoyed my job. But it went from me like kind of organizing festivals and organizing fashion shows to being, okay, you're doing digital marketing for 6 months at home, not talking to nobody. And I think at the time my housemates worked outside the house. So there were days, weekends I might not speak to nobody. So I just kind of quit my job, went kind of freelance, and I was like, oh my God, you have to make money as an artist, like eat, food. That was a bit mad. So yeah, it was like doing the podcast, and then thankfully Dublin sponsored that. And doing loads of different bits and like kind of freelance. You know, I've been teaching like music classes to kids all over Kildare for the last how many months. I've just been staying busy for the most part, which is all you can really do when you're in a panini, you know, it's kind of nuts. So you have to keep moving. A panini, you know?
Pablo,
a panciente.
Pan de Milvado.
Oh, okay. So, Lucina, it's been so nice hearing bands talking about funding and arts offices and stuff in a really positive way. Do you feel like there was a bit of a misconception before all of this about the role of the arts office or the intentions of the councils and arts offices?
I think I suppose we are a small part of the local authority, and it can be hard, I think, just sometimes to get visibility for what we do, because I say the work that we do is often slow and quiet, and it can often happen behind the scenes. I mentioned earlier about some arts and health programs. It's not always appropriate that there's a camera in there, and it's just happening quietly, but it's the people that are directly involved benefiting from it. So I think, certainly we can all benefit from a little bit of extra publicity. It is nice, of course, and the local authority is acknowledged, just to, I suppose, to try and help us in the future, and, you know, funding budget time of the year again, it's always good. I might just mention this particular scheme though, because this is the scheme that funded this, the local live performance programming scheme. It's a little bit of a mouthful. And this was the first time that I really had worked with the Department of Tourism, Culture and Arts on a scheme like this. So most of our funding comes from the Arts Council or Creative Ireland, or the local authority itself. But I thought as a mix, this scheme was offered to every local authority in Ireland from the department. And I thought it was a really good way of the department acknowledging that we had local knowledge and that this scheme could be administered locally, because we knew venues, and I think health and safety needed to be an extra priority this time round, just about what was possible, because when we advertised it, we didn't know whether it was begun online, offline. We didn't know if anybody would apply for it either. So, and I know that there is 25 million for live entertainment in next year's budget. So I don't know if there's a plan specifically for local authorities to continue this relationship, but it's worked really well, and it's given me a lot of, I suppose, just things to reflect on about where we might go to from here with schemes like this.
Yeah, I did, as I think Dave and Paul from Bellix one said earlier on, there was a screen fatigue that happened after a while, because it's just not really in our nature to sing down a camera lens, really, and for that to be the way we communicate with people. But some really wonderful things came out of it, like I was saying, in terms of accessibility. We're going to hear from Sive now, who she's a very creative, innovative person anyway, and a wonderful musician that I was delighted that we had at the festival. But let's hear her talking a little bit about what things she got up to during the pandemic as an artist. Here, what was it like creatively to even begin writing in such a weird time, and then to go ahead and release something during a pandemic when you couldn't play live to people?
Yeah, definitely, like, 'cause I grew up in Kildare as well, and I never played, like, we did some youth gigs and stuff when I was a teenager, and then for years just never played here. But in the last couple of years before the pandemic, I've had some nice smaller gigs, like support slots. I think Nace in particular has gotten a bit better for live music. But like the pandemic has been great. The pandemic hasn't been great, but like, you know, like, I suppose I never would have got an opportunity to just do my own gig in the Mo Theatre before. So that kind of, bringing say like the live performance scheme, bringing music and funding outside of Dublin into all these venues so that they can put on smaller gigs and they're not relying on, you know, massive overheads, has been a silver lining, I suppose.
Sive also did a wonderful thing where she was streaming gigs into like nursing homes and things like that, which I just thought was a really amazing way of using that time. So Lucina, going forward, and hearing nothing but positive things from artists about these schemes, do you see them continuing this kind of hybrid form of show continuing? And what do you need to continue the type of schemes that you've been doing over the past year?
Well, I think as regards hybrid, it's already been said, but I've been at a couple of live gigs. I want to say not all music gigs in the last few weeks, and I just think that whole sensory experience, that immersive experience of the live, you just can't beat it. And wonderful and all as live events are online. I don't know if I felt that buzz, you know, when you feel like you could run home instead of driving home after a live event, that rush that you get. And I just think it would be, there's no substitute for it. And if you haven't experienced it, then you can't talk to that. So, but obviously, as again was said earlier, lots of people that couldn't have made it live can experience it from all over the world, and that's amazing. But I just think the quality of it needs to be maintained. But I know even today in preparation for this, you know, if this was a live event or an event when we were in the room, I feel the conversation would be a different conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe just they always feel a little bit more formal. I just don't think every single gig not everything can be recorded, and there's an expectation that it will, and I don't think that's fair on the organisers. There's a huge expense, and we had significant funding for this, and that one thing that I have, one of my bugbears, is that artists get paid. I said you wouldn't ask a plumber to come and hang radiators in your house and say, well, can you do that for your CV? It'll be a great experience for you. And yet there's an expectation that artists, and not just performers, you know, could be visual artists as well. But I think some of the artists themselves have a responsibility there. And a lot of artists did work for free online to keep engaged and to keep momentum going, and maybe as part of their creative process. But to roll back then and that there's going to be paid gigs, which I think there absolutely should be. I think that'll just be interesting how all that plays out. Right now it feels it's a little bit too soon to say exactly where to from here, but certainly I have an eye on that live entertainment scheme that I mentioned earlier, that funding in the budget, and hoping that we can have that local authorities are involved in that, because like I said, local knowledge I think is really important. Like, we know the county, we know the venues, we know the artists that live here, and we know the audiences. So we'd hope that can be leveraged again, and to support artists. And it all comes back to making better art. That's what I suppose the end game for all of us. And
one more thing, how was the Christy Moore gig for you?
It was amazing. I missed all of the other gigs because I actually got COVID, despite being doubly vaccinated. So I was isolating for all of the other gigs. So after watching this and the excitement of the scheme and seeing who we had, so I missed all of them except Christy. But it was fantastic. I was very emotional. Again, live music gets me every time. But it was emotional not just because of the songs he was singing, just being in a room with people. and I felt that he had really come home as well. So yeah, it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and I think everybody in the room, you got that shared experience, and that's probably why it felt so special as well, that we shared it with the rest of the audience that were there.
Oh, we're lucky to have him. We're also very lucky to have you, Lucina. Thank you so much for being on the panel today, and very sincerely on behalf of a lot of people, thank you for all the work you've been doing in the past 18 months. It's been completely invaluable to the likes of me and lots of people I know. So thank you so much.
Yeah, can I just say one last thing actually about that?
Sure.
I think that people like me, so arts officers across the country, a lot of us started out as freelance artists, and I know I did. And I was very conscious during the pandemic that I had a job and was paid every week, and just felt this sense of responsibility to artists. And I'd say that would be across the board, that we would have really felt for the people we were representing as well, and had some sense of what that might have been for them. So I think that was always there in terms of trying to champion the arts, that, there's a lot of empathy there for the people we're working with.
Yeah, you understand it. That makes perfect sense. Lucina, thank you so much for talking to me. I am going to go on to our final panelist for this panel today, who's going to be telling us about a different angle on things during the pandemic and moving forward. So welcome to Ruth Fuller from Fuller Marketing. Hi.
Hi, MayKay. How's it going?
I'm great, Ruth. Thanks so much for being here. Would you give us a brief introduction into yourself and into Fuller Marketing, please?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Ruth Fuller. I'm the Managing Director of Fuller Marketing. We're a marketing consultancy business, and we focus on results for clients. So growth, sales, whatever the mandate might be.
So I'm going to avoid as best I can using words like pivot and things like that, because it's all
my favorite words.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So one thing, I suppose, for me, playing live shows, it's one of those things where you're backstage and it's always the question of, will I peek out and see if there's anybody there, or will I just walk out and just whatever happens, happens? So that's an obvious thing, and it's very quantifiable. For when this all went online during the pandemic, how did you pivot to change? How did people, or you can speak to your own experience or kind of more generally, whichever you prefer. What were the kind of crucial turning point pivots that people made to start approaching this in a more digital mind frame?
Yeah, well, I suppose that the pandemic came like a kind of a tsunami really on top of people. Most people were absolutely blindsided by it. And it was a huge shift, a cultural shift, behavioral shift in every element of it. So if you cast your mind back to, March 18 months ago or so, sure, no one had a clue. No one had a clue. So everyone locked down, stopped talking to everyone. And, even the business climate at the time, I had, clients like the Opera House and stuff, who obviously all gigs were cancelled, all events were cancelled, all advertising was pulled, and you were saying, oh my God, is this going to be every client? Is this going to be every business? And here things were covered, and the arts had a terrible time. But, we suddenly evolved after, a few weeks of, well, we do need to talk to people. And do you remember Zoom calls and quizzes? And that was a bit of carry on for a while. And
House party was a thing for about 60 seconds at one point.
Yes.
I thought that was the future.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a bit of so instrumental, but thank God that was fleeting enough anyway, and I've returned to normal. But I suppose the arts, web conferences, digital events all came to the fore, and we had to learn new behaviors and new ways of operating so that we could still have those social connections in a world where we couldn't physically have them. So they filled very much an important gap for people, and still do in some respects. And I think as we emerge to a kind of hopefully post lockdown world, there will be people who are not comfortable, and there will be people who have suffered through the pandemic, and it's how do you accommodate those people? As Lucina was saying, that live event, that live audience is just impossible to beat. It's fantastic, but that's not accessible to everyone for one reason or another. Some of the people tonight spoke about those different things, or there might be increased opportunity from global listeners. I think Bellix1 had people tuning in from New Zealand. So how do we accommodate all those people in a future world, and where does that make sense? So that's literally being worked out on the fly. I think hybrid events are probably where we're at for the time being, and how they become, you know, the norm or part of the norm into the future, time will tell.
And I think, as Lucina said, it actually does feel a little bit soon to be, especially because our October 22nd date seems a little bit up in the air at the moment now. We don't actually need to get into that because, well, I'll pass out probably, so we won't get into that. I think when we're looking at this, like, complete digital transformation that's happened over the past 18 months, which has had some really great parts of it, I just want to hear a clip from a chat I had with Paddy Casey, because I keep making out like Paddy Casey's 100 years old. He's not. He's a young man. He's been in the business a long time, and has been through a couple of these transformations, and not always as he would see it from a completely positive standpoint. So let's hear Paddy Casey talking a little bit about that. And you dislike Spotify as much as me, I think.
Oh, jeez, yeah, hate it with vengeance.
And you have to get in on it though, don't you?
No, I don't think you do. I know everyone says you do, but I think, you know what, I mean, you're just as capable of building your own thing as Spotify is. I mean, Spotify is it's just what they used to be called.
Oh, it was Napster.
It's
yeah.
just Napster based.
Yeah.
And look, I wouldn't mind Spotify if it was. Am I on a rant?
Yeah, I love
a
it.
little bit. I wouldn't mind Spotify if it was, you know, purely pirate. That's grand. I can take that. But it's pretending that it's given to musicians, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's literally just stealing from musicians. So.
Yeah.
And now it's become a thing, and because of the internet, it's just become a thing where literally everyone thinks they're supporting musicians by listening to them on Spotify, but they're not. They're if anything, they're killing. But you know what? That's the way the world is now, and I'll stop being a grumpy old man. So.
I actually wished he hadn't stopped being a grumpy man there. I don't mind a rant like that, because I think it's very relatable for so many artists, Ruth, who feel like, as much as social platforms allow us to really look after, I hate saying the word brand, but it's the only one I can think of, but let us own our own brand and create our own brand and nurture our own brand. It also feels like the power is not in our hands at all. And I think people are really scared of this new digital age for that reason. How do you feel about that end of things?
Yeah, I think you're right to be concerned, to be honest. It's like the arts is taking one hammering after the other, from, you know, Spotify and various other lookalikes to now the pandemic. You know, you can appreciate why Paddy has little trust in the system. And there will be common complaints and pushback on the role of Uber, let's say, in a similar capacity. So there are, you know, tech companies creaming off the top, or more than the top, significantly more, and you know, it's people who are paying the price. So I can appreciate Paddy's position and would fully support his vision to go it alone. Like, why are you? Okay, it's really hard because you're not like U2 or somebody taking a stand, or Enya or somebody big taking a stand. You're like, all right, well, I need to make a living too, and this is getting my name out there, and it's marketing me. And I suppose it very much depends where in your career you are and where your audience is. But if you're someone like Paddy who has an audience, or you're starting out like Sive or someone else who can, you know, not so much starting out, but a few years under the belt, has built an audience, and you can conceivably engage with them directly, absolutely, that is the way to go. Because everyone else is just taking a little cut or big cut, and it's the artist that's ultimately paying the price here. I think there is an opportunity for artists around digital, and you know, it's how creative you could be. So if we think about some of the audiences that came to Kildare Culture Presents Comeback, and how, you know, we saw audiences coming in from far reaches of the globe, that's the opportunity for artists. And that's where, you know, you got to think, you know, like in advance of today's interview, I was thinking about different options, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Obviously there's merchandise, and, you know, like I remember as a teenager getting CDs which had bonus tracks and different kind of things. So, you know, what can you offer your online audiences that, you know, is a win for them and a win for you. And where does that commercial opportunity lie? Merchandise, tickets, interviews, one-on-one, things that wouldn't be possible in real life, nor maybe you might want to do in real life, you may be able to do in a digital world. So kind of, you know, back to basics in terms of what has always worked for the music industry, and then apply those to digital landscape and look for the opportunities there. That's what I'd be saying to try, because you might as well try. I mean, you know, otherwise it's global tech companies pillaging your income.
Yeah. And let's hear from another amazing artist that played at the Comeback Festival, Megan O'Neill, who has another kind of angle on the digital side of things.
Forever. And you're like, oh God, that's not what that was kind of one little phase.
Yeah.
And it bled into other stuff that I was doing. And don't get me wrong, I love so much of Americana and folk and country. And I think when it comes to my own songwriting, stories will always be the most important thing. And I get that from those genres. Like, song has to have a really strong story. But yeah, with the new album, I was like, I'm gonna just do what I want. And even more so with this new stuff which you'll hear tonight, oh my God, we've gone way more into that kind of pop electronic. I suppose just loads more of layers of that. And that's where we've got new stuff coming out next year, and that's where that's all going. So it's really exciting to explore new sounds and be comfortable in the uncertainty of exploring those new sounds, because there was definitely taking a bit of time over the last year and a half not playing gigs. I sat back and I was like, okay, what kind of music do I actually want to make? Even though totally changing tune on that means I have to reinvent a live setup, and I have to work with different people, and I have to totally revamp what I can do as a live artist. But that's exciting.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
The idea of holding yourself back from that. We're in such the music industry is a difficult business. We both know this very well. But the privilege of being able to explore different sides of art is an incredible thing.
Incredible.
And it'd be crazy to stop yourself doing that because you feel you've put yourself in a box.
Well, that's the thing. And I think for years I was still figuring a lot of that stuff out, don't get me wrong. But there was definitely a feeling that I had to stay in a lane because that's where I started and that's what people would expect. And having the, time we've all had to just reflect and be like, screw it, I'm gonna do what I wanna do. And there will be a whole new audience for that. That hopefully there'll still be the audience that like what I do now, but there'll be also a whole new audience for that too.
Ruth, so that was a wonderful Megan O'Neill. I talked to Megan as well about, so there was, I think, around 40, 50 people in the room each day for those shows. And I think in total there was close to 100,000 views online. So really it would be foolish, wouldn't it, to say the digital thing's done now because live events are back on.
Exactly. Absolutely. And we saw loads of examples quoted throughout the webinar today around, people who can't travel, people who might be underage, people who might be unable to attend for one reason or the other. So you're widening the reach, you're widening the audience, and you're opening up your music, your name, your reputation to wider audiences. There are, significant challenges with digital marketing of virtual events and the getting the attendance right and the engagement right, things that you spoke about, and that inability to kind of peek behind the curtain and see who's there and what's happening. So but there are things that can be overcome with a marketing strategy. So with nothing's impossible. It's just a different landscape than it was. So it's about taking what works from existing marketing and music industry bits and bringing them together.
And Ruth, just as a final word from yourself today, I think what Megan touched on there about when she was talking specifically to songwriting, that you have to go back to basics when you're putting all this fluff around things, you have to go back and go, hang on a second, have I got a good song? And I suppose as a person involved in arts marketing, isn't that kind of the golden rule? You go back to basics and make sure that what your foundation is right and it's you.
Yeah, and I suppose digital marketing is sold on a supply and demand basis. So good content will reduce cost, increase reach, drive sales. And you might see, while it could be slightly uncomfortable, reality, you will see that, bigger, huge name artists will sell quicker, generate more engagement, generate more views than lesser known artists. So everything that we apply in real life, whether it's song making or content creation, is the same in a digital marketing perspective.
Ruth Fuller from Fuller Marketing, thank you so much for all that insight, and as well, the same as Lucina, thanks so much for all the work that you and your colleagues are all continuing to do to get us all back in front of people. And best of luck with everything going forward as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Let's go back to Lloyd, and just a final word from Lloyd, who I kind of would trust with anything really, Lloyd. I think if we give the management of this whole pandemic to you, we might actually be out of it already. What would you leave us with here going forward, Lloyd, in terms of what we should expect over the coming year, and as kind of not just as more so as consumers rather than as an artist, but as consumers of music and people interested in arts, what can we do to make sure this gets back on the road and back up and running the way it kind of was before?
Oh yeah, that's quite a thing to round up on. I suppose that the key takeaway for me will be balance. And there's a balance between people's personal rights and freedoms to move and the right to be anonymous and not be interfered with by the state. And I'm a passionate believer and defender of that, having seen it firsthand go wrong in many countries and many places. So coupled with that is public safety and the protection of the vulnerable and the right to work and make money and enjoy ourselves out in an environment or festival or business type setting. So it's about getting the balance right. And I think the Irish government's doing a brilliant job in public safety and supporting people and moving in the right direction. So if we can get the balance right, if the technology is not too intrusive, if it's a quick check to go in and people are okay with that, that's better than being tracked 24 hours a day like we are in some countries. And it's just about knowledge, balance, and giving the power to the people to decide.
Yeah, that makes sense, Lloyd. Your insight and experience is just invaluable and I much appreciated. Thank you for being here at the Comeback webinar, and very, very, very best of luck with the coming months. So Lucina Russell, just to round things out, Lucina, you said everything I could possibly have asked of you today. Are there things coming up that you'd like to make us aware of, or are there any final words you'd like to say in terms of the next kind of year? I'm
just going to go back to Culture Night, which happened on the 17th of September this year. And last year, I suppose, everything was almost online. And this year, it's so exciting to see what creative people in the county came up with. So we had over 60 events, and most of those were live events of some sort. And I think what I'm looking forward to is hearing from artists and seeing what they come up with, because I think that's what we need to do. Some of I mentioned earlier about the Battle of the Bands at Oxygen, that came from an artist in Kildare. And I'm looking forward to hearing their ideas. I'd also be very mindful as well of artists. I'm around long enough to have seen people reinvent themselves many times, but I suppose we'd be keen as well that we would just look at minding the artists as well, and just knowing that people have come through a traumatic experience as well, and just that duty of care to artists. I feel quite strongly about that. So if we can maintain that while also allowing people to, or facilitate them to re-emerge in digital spaces, live spaces, or both, I look forward to it. Look forward to seeing what's next.
Great, thank you so much, Lucina Russell, Arts Officer with Kildare County Council. Thanks so much for being here at on this panel today, and thanks again to Lloyd Mayer and to Ruth Fuller for a really, really insightful and interesting chat. And I think, like I said at the beginning, it's really nice to be talking about solutions while still acknowledging the kind of pain and difficulty we've all gone through in the past while and recovering from that. But what I love hearing really is we all went through that kind of panicky mode of like, we'll do whatever and we'll take whatever and we just want to keep moving. People are getting a little bit pickier now and saying, as Lucina was saying, no, you don't always have to stream things if that doesn't make sense financially or creatively. There's lots to be taken from that panel today. And it's been wonderful hearing back from the artists themselves as well. and how they've been dealing with things and looking forward as well. Thank you so much to Davis Events for putting on this chat, and for all the panelists and artists involved in the Kildare Comeback Festival. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of it, and I hope we can do it again. And I hope that everybody has gotten something out of today. Certainly to look forward to things reopening and seeing you all in a room again. And to close things out, a show I will never forget. I can't believe I was privileged enough to be in the room with just a handful of people watching Bell X1 play. And so we're going to close out today's comeback webinar with Bell X1's Haint Blue.
We have a couple new songs, and I'd love to play you one. This is called Haint Blue. We reached the clearing and sat down. I could see that you've been crying. And I remember the dream I had. One of you and you're falling through the ice. I could see your face on the other side, and I'm pounding with my fist. This photograph, one of you and me, try not to laugh, and it's a sacred thing. It's a host. I see you and I see myself. You look a little different. Yeah, you're glowing like a firefly, like a vision, like a ghost. And in the clearing, the room came to life. Walls became the world all around. And the hate got his paws on my shoulder. He's pinning me to the ground, and he's toying with his prize, with no malice in his eyes. This photograph, one of you and me, try not to laugh, but it's a sacred thing. It's a host. I see you, I see myself. You look a little different. Yeah, you're glowing like a firefly, like a vision, like a ghost. Paint the porch robin egg blue, and the hate you just pass on through. Yes, thinking the roof is but the sky, and he'll walk on by. We paint the porch robin egg blue. No hates of blue eggs bothering you. No, your wife, your son, or your daughter, 'cause he's thinking that it's water. Photograph, one of you and me, try not to laugh, and it's a sacred thing. It's a host. See you, I see myself. You look a little different. Yeah, you're glowing like a firefly, like a vision. Yeah, I'm holding this photograph. One of you and me, try not to laugh, and it's a sacred thing. It's a host. See you, I see myself. You look a little different. Yeah, you're glowing like a firefly, like a vision, like
a ghost. Yeah, we're made like the past.